In our Mega Mishmar a few weeks ago, we discussed the book of Maccabees, and we noted that the author of the book of Maccabees seems to be relatively what we would consider traditional in the way he approaches the story, in his view of God and the story, in the way he draws on Tanakh. And we noted that the reason, the simplest reason for the book of Maccabees not appearing in Tanakh is simply that it was written after the era of canonization. But as we read through it, we noted that there are points here and there where one could argue that perhaps the reason that it didn't make it into the canon was because it's at odds with the theology of Chazal. And to give one example, which is given by Rabbi Chaim Angel, which again, whether or not this would be a sufficient reason to not include it within the canon, it definitely seems to be at odds with Chazal's perspective in the world. And that is the issue of zealotry. And we noted that in the book of Maccabees, the Chashmonaim, the Maccabees, are described as actively going in the way of Pinchas, and in fact, they invoke that explicitly, that they act as Kanaim, just like Pinchas did when he killed Zimri and Cosby. And that's even what they say in their speeches, that we want you to follow in the path of Pinchas. Now, while Pinchas himself, in the eyes of Chumash at least, is clearly a positive figure, Chazal express hesitation with his approach of zealotry. So much so that the Yerushalmi in Sanhedrin in the ninth Perek says, "Upinchas shelo b'ratzon chachamim." When Pinchas acted, it was against the will of the chachamim. And Amar of Yehuda bar Pazi, "Bikshu l'nadoto ilule shekafta alav ruach hakodesh, v'amra v'haitalo zarach harav brit kunan olam." They would have put him in. They would have excommunicated him if it weren't for the fact that Hashem had spoken up and said this was the right thing and gave him a bracha. So in the end of the day, obviously, Chazal aren't going to criticize Pinchas, and presumably they're not denying that what he did was correct. As the Yerushalmi ends, God approved of it. But what I think the Yerushalmi is saying is that the Chachamim, when they approached it, could not say that this was the right thing to do because it was an exceptional moment. And the normal way that you approach this issue is that we're opposed to zealotry. And while it might have been good for Pinchas, if it hadn't been for the explicit sanction of Hashem, we wouldn't have known that. And therefore, we can't use it as a model. We can't use it as the basis for constructing a theology. And therefore, for Chazal, if someone is to say, I'm acting like Pinchas, even if Pinchas himself was right, that move from extending it from Pinchas to a lifestyle that should be emulated on a regular basis, that's something Chazal were opposed to. And therefore, Angel suggests that perhaps that's part of why the book of Maccabees doesn't make it into the traditional canon. Because in fact, the spirit of the book of Maccabees, as much as most of it is traditional, in this sense, it's celebration rather than its begrudging acceptance of zealotry, is definitely intention with the view of Chazal. So that is another perspective on the book of Maccabees. A similar idea emerges from the midrashic notion that Pinchas is Eliyahu, because Eliyahu is also presented as a Kanai, but while the Kanaot of Pinchas is approved by Tanakh, that's not true of Eliyahu. And after Eliyahu insists several times over that Kanoti Kineti Lashem, that I was zealous for God, instead of approving it and giving him a bracha, Hashem fires him. And he says, it's enough, you should go and you should appoint Elisha. And Rav Yaakov Meidan once contended that the Midrash is making the same point, that for someone to be a Kanai once, that can be acceptable. But if in fact Pinchas is Eliyahu, which means that he didn't just do it once, but later he allowed it to become a lifestyle, so then that person can no longer be a Navi. And that's why Eliyahu has to be fired and be replaced with Elisha, who comes across as a much more calm personality than Eliyahu. And again, even if the Midrash is not literal, simply the fact that Eliyahu, even from what we know of him just in Tanakh, without that Midrashic addition, is someone who isn't just a Kanai once, but makes that really his definition. The fact that is rejected by Hashem emphasizes this point that while Chazal may have recognized that sometimes kanot is necessary, to take it beyond that and make it something you do consistently and make it the way you define yourself, that is problematic. And the fact that in the book of Maccabees they draw on Pinchas not just as he did the right thing, but we should always be like Pinchas, again, it could be that is part of the reason that the book of Maccabees doesn't make it into the traditional canon, despite the fact that much of it does shed light from a proper theological perspective on the miracles of Chanukah.